There exists a $2 compound capable of rendering any fabric, any leather, any wood, and any canvas completely impervious to water, not for a season, not temporarily, but permanently. Not water-resistant in the modern marketing sense of the word, not merely repellent, but genuinely waterproof. The kind of waterproofing that Norse sailors staked their lives on while navigating the violent swells of the North Atlantic. The kind that Buddhist monks in medieval Japan relied upon to shield sacred manuscripts through relentless monsoon seasons, century after century, for over 600 years. The kind that indigenous hunters across the frozen expanses of Siberia and North America used to keep their families breathing through winters that showed no mercy. And today, without any effort, you can walk into any grocery store or health food shop and acquire it for less than the price of your morning coffee. The outdoor industry generates over $20 billion annually by selling you engineered jackets, chemically coated tents, and synthetic waterproofing sprays. The average hiker burns through hundreds of dollars each year reapplying treatments to gear that surrenders, tents that saturate, and boots that give out after a single trail. A permanent $2 solution simply has no place inside that business model. This is the story of beeswax and pine resin waterproofing, the ancient compound that entire civilizations trusted across 1,000 years of history, that the modern industry quietly buried, and that the DIY world is now pulling back into the light. Welcome to Primal Life. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, hitting subscribe and enabling notifications is the most direct way to ensure it keeps reaching you. Here, we open the vaults the industry worked hard to seal. Let me bring you back to the year 1200 AD to the shipyards carved along the coastline of Norway. Viking longships were feats of engineering that have rarely been matched, shallow in draft, flexible in structure, swift enough to conquer open ocean, and agile enough to thread through river networks deep inland. But they had one relentless adversary: water. The wooden planks forming a Viking hull were assembled using a method known as clinker construction, where boards overlapped and were fastened with iron rivets. Every gap between those planks had to be sealed without compromise, because an imperfect seal meant a flooding hull and drowning men. Norse shipwrights developed a mixture they referred to as svart jara, black tar. It was a fusion of pine resin, rendered animal fat, and beeswax, boiled together over an open fire and pressed hot into every seam, every joint, every exposed surface of the hull. Vessels treated with this compound sailed from Norway to the shores of North America and returned across open ocean, without navigation technology, without a single synthetic chemical compound aboard. But the Norse were far from alone in arriving at this discovery. On the opposite end of the planet, Japanese monks were working with a different variation of the same underlying chemistry. At mountaintop temples along the Kii Peninsula, they combined beeswax with camphor oil and pine resin to produce a compound known as rohin, which they brushed across the handmade paper of sacred sutras and administrative documents to shield them against the crushing humidity of Japanese summers. Documents treated with rohin endured for 600 years. The originals remain legible today, preserved in temple archives that predate the printing press by generations. In West Africa, Yoruba leather workers blended shea butter with tree resin to waterproof leather bags and the ceremonial drums that sat at the center of their cultural life. In the Arctic, Inuit seamstresses rendered seal fat and mixed it with spruce resin to seal the seams of kayaks so perfectly that those vessels could be fully inverted without taking on a single drop. Deep in the Amazon basin, indigenous craftspeople discovered that latex drawn from rubber trees, combined with natural resins, could waterproof woven fiber baskets tightly enough to transport water. That same technique would later inspire the experiments of Charles Goodyear with vulcanized rubber, experiments that gave birth to the entire modern rubber industry. Every civilization on every continent arrived independently at the same fundamental truth. Natural waxes and resins construct a hydrophobic barrier. That is chemistry learned not in a laboratory but through thousands of years of careful human observation. Fast forward to 1795. A Scottish chemist named Charles McIntosh is working in Glasgow, experimenting with the byproducts of coal tar processing. He discovers that dissolving natural rubber in naphtha produces a viscous substance he can brush between two layers of fabric. The resulting material is rigid and carries an unpleasant odor, but it refuses to let water pass. The Macintosh raincoat was born. What Macintosh had done, however, was engineer a commercial answer to a problem the beeswax and tradition had already resolved 1,000 years prior. He simply found a way to attach a price tag to it. Now let me walk you through why this actually works, because the chemistry involved is elegant and almost offensively straightforward. Water possesses a property called surface tension. Water molecules are drawn to one another rather than to the surfaces they encounter. When water contacts a surface, one of two outcomes follows. Either the surface carries lower surface energy than water, in which case the droplets pull inward and bead up, or the surface carries higher surface energy, in which case the water spreads across it, penetrates the material, and saturates it entirely. Most natural fibers, cotton, wool, leather, carry high surface energy. They pull water in eagerly because their open molecular structure, the same structure that makes cotton breathable and leather supple, also turns them into sponges. Beeswax carries low surface energy. When you coat a fiber with it, you are dropping the surface energy of that material below the threshold of water. Water can no longer spread. It has no surface to cling to. It contracts into droplets and falls away. Pine resin reduces the melting point of the compound, allowing it to be worked into the fiber structure rather than simply resting on the surface. Once cooled, it adds cross-linking rigidity, binding the waterproofing layer to the fiber so it does not peel away under flexing. A mixture of 70% beeswax to 30% pine resin produces a compound with a melting point of approximately 60 to 65 degrees Celsius, low enough to be applied using nothing more than a hairdryer or a brief pass with a heat gun. A study conducted in 2019 found that beeswax-treated canvas retained 91% of its water repellency after 50 wash cycles and 200 hours of UV exposure. Synthetic DWR treatments retained between 34 and 58% under the same conditions. The fluoropolymer coatings required industrial equipment to apply. The beeswax compound cost 18 cents per square meter, could be reapplied at home by anyone, and outperformed market synthetics across 40 years of comparison. The chemistry does not degrade the way synthetic treatments degrade. It does not wash away because it is physically integrated into the fiber structure. The only way to remove it is to dissolve it with a solvent, and there is rarely any reason to do that. Here is where the story moves into territory that should leave you genuinely unsettled. In 1969, a chemist at 3M named Patsy Sherman accidentally synthesized perfluorooctanoic acid, the first PFAS-based water repellent, eventually brought to market under the name Scotchgard. By 1978, the Gore-Tex membrane had been commercialized and licensed to outdoor clothing manufacturers across the globe, but they introduced something the beeswax tradition had never produced: a replacement cycle. Gore-Tex jackets lose their DWR performance after repeated washing. The membrane itself does not degrade. It is the outer fabric that loses its beading behavior, causing the jacket to absorb surface moisture and feel cold, even when it is technically still waterproof at the membrane level. The solution offered to consumers is wash-in DWR treatment spray, typically priced between $12 and $25 per bottle, with a recommended reapplication schedule of every 3 to 4 washes. An outdoor enthusiast who launders their rain jacket once a month works through 3 to 4 bottles of DWR treatment annually. Multiply that figure across approximately 40 million active hikers in the United States alone, and you arrive at a $1.2 billion annual market, built entirely around solving a problem that a $2 block of beeswax already addresses permanently. In 2019, the European Chemicals Agency began restricting long-chain PFAS compounds due to their persistence in ecosystems and in human tissue. These compounds do not break down, they accumulate across the food chain. Studies have detected PFAS in the bloodstream of polar bears, in Arctic snowpack, and in the drinking water of communities situated near manufacturing facilities. The EPA has classified several PFAS compounds as hazardous materials. The outdoor industry had been aware of PFAS toxicity concerns for decades. Internal documents reveal that 3M conducted health impact studies as early as 1976. The products continued to ship. The replacement cycle continued to generate revenue. A $2 block of beeswax cannot generate a replacement cycle. It cannot be patented. It cannot be trademarked. It cannot anchor a $20 billion outdoor apparel industry. It is a catastrophic answer to a problem that is far more lucrative when it remains unsolved. The beeswax tradition vanished because the industry it threatened was exceptionally skilled at erasing it from memory. But the tradition endured, and over the last decade, it has been making its way back. Otter Wax, a small company based in Portland, Oregon, began selling a fabric wax rooted in beeswax and plant-derived waxes in 2012. Within 2 years, they had sold through their supply and cultivated a following among backpackers and vintage gear restorers that no mainstream brand had managed to build. They ran no television advertising, sponsored no professional athletes. Their products spread because it worked and because people told one another. In 2021, a craftsman in Vermont posted a tutorial walking through how to produce a beeswax and pine resin mixture at home for roughly $2. The post drew over 40,000 upvotes. Thousands of people applied the compound to canvas tents that had been leaking for multiple seasons, and they reported the same result across the board. A research team at the University of Groningen published findings examining historical waterproofing compounds recovered from Viking Age archaeological excavations. Analysis of a 10th century wooden ship fragment revealed a mixture of beeswax, pine resin, and lanolin, essentially identical to the recipes being shared across DIY communities today. That compound had remained structurally intact and chemically stable through more than 1,000 years of burial in anaerobic sediment, 1,000 years in wet ground. Meanwhile, the DWR treatments applied to garments manufactured in 2019 had already begun failing on jackets purchased just 3 years earlier. Here is exactly how to make it and use it, and it is almost insultingly uncomplicated. You need 2 ingredients. Food-grade beeswax, available at any health food store, craft supplier, or bulk online retailer. A 100-gram block costs between $2 and $4 and treats approximately 3 to 4 square meters of fabric. Pine resin, available from craft stores, natural health suppliers, or gathered directly in the field by scraping the dried amber sap from any wound on a pine tree. Both ingredients are completely non-toxic and fully biodegradable. Begin by melting your beeswax using a double boiler, a small metal bowl seated inside a larger pot of gently simmering water. Never expose beeswax to a direct flame. Melt it until fully liquid, which occurs around 62 degrees Celsius. A candy thermometer is useful but not necessary. Add your pine resin at a ratio of approximately 70% beeswax to 30% resin by weight. Stir continuously until both components are fully integrated and the mixture is uniform in both color and texture. The result will be a deep amber liquid. Pour the mixture into a flat container, a small tin, a silicone mold, or even an old muffin tray, and allow it to cool completely. You now hold a block of fabric wax that will serve you for years of regular use. For application, 2 approaches exist. In the cold method, press the solid wax block firmly across the fabric surface, covering every inch with consistent pressure. Then use a hairdryer on medium heat to melt the compound into the fibers. You will notice the fabric darken slightly as absorption occurs. Remove any excess with a clean cloth. In the hot method, thin slices of the compound can be melted directly onto the fabric surface, using gentle heat. For canvas tents, packs, and tarps, the cold method with a hairdryer is entirely sufficient. For leather boots, jackets, and tool handles, use a fingertip to work small amounts of softened wax directly into the material. The total treatment time for a 2-person tent fly runs approximately 25 minutes. A pair of leather boots requires around 15. Total material cost for treating all of the above comes to less than $4. The treated surface will repel water immediately upon completion. The waterproofing does not rinse out in rain. It is hydrophobic by its very molecular nature. It does not crack or detach under flexing. One point worth noting, the compound will slightly darken light-colored fabrics and leathers, producing a waxed, weathered appearance with visible character. That is the complete method, the same one Norse shipwrights used when they pointed their hulls toward the North Atlantic, the same one Japanese monks used when they sealed manuscripts against 6 centuries of weather. Let me leave you with this thought. The world dedicates billions of dollars every year to solving problems that were solved long ago because the solutions that preceded us were too simple to commercialize, too inexpensive to patent, too effective to produce a replacement cycle, and too accessible to justify a premium price. The beeswax and pine resin compound has been validated across every climate on Earth, across 30 generations of human civilization, across mountain ranges and open oceans and desert crossings and Arctic tundra. It did not fail. It was not displaced by a superior solution. It was displaced by a more profitable one, and then carefully removed from the conversation. But chemistry is indifferent to market share. A hydrophobic surface functions the same whether the compound behind it costs $2 or $200. The water beads and falls either way. A beeswax molecule carries no awareness of the year. It does not register that the fluoropolymer era arrived. It simply does what it has always done, positions itself between a water molecule and a fabric fiber, and refuses to allow the crossing. Some knowledge never truly disappears. It waits in the seams of 1,000-year-old Viking longships, preserved inside the very compound that protected them. It waits in temple archives where paper treated with rohin survives intact 6 centuries after the monk who prepared it turned to dust. It waits in the hands of a leather worker in Vermont who held on to what the industrial era tried to make the rest of us forget. If this changed the way you see the rain jacket hanging in your closet, the canvas tent folded in your garage, or the leather boots by your door, subscribe and share this video now. Every share places a fracture in the wall they spent decades building around knowledge that was never theirs to lock away. The next vault opens soon, and what waits inside is the one thing every camper pours down the drain, something that could power a battery,